Hey everybody, it's hwsteele, and in this video I want to talk to you about another type of cycle, a cycle of return that can be used to help anticipate or forecast the stock markets. Now this cycle is a little bit more complicated than what I had talked about in the previous Esoteric Cycle video I just did. So I wanted to go ahead and cover it in its own video. Now, basically, the cycle works like this. You base it off a Sonata cycle between two planets, and it's the amount of time for that cycle, the start of that Sonata cycle, to return to the same place in the zodiac. Now, it sounds a little bit confusing, but let me tell you and show you what I mean. We're going to use the Earth, its 365-day cycle, and Mars, its 687-day cycle, to create a Sonata cycle. And I brought up the Sonata period calculator here, entered in the two time periods for those cycles, and it created a 779-day Sonata period for those two cycles. So what that means is it takes, on average, 779 days for a conjunction of the Earth and Mars, or actually the Sun and Mars from our point of view, to repeat. Now, let me bring an astrolog here. And I have the next conjunction of the Sun and Mars. It's going to be on September 1st, 2019 at about 159 degrees, which is 9 degrees of the sign Virgo right there. And then I have, move this out of the way, the next conjunction after that, which happens on October 8th, 2021. And the conjunction happens at about 195 degrees, or about 15 degrees Libra. Okay, so let's calculate, so I can show you a little something here, the time between these two dates. The first date is September 1st, 2019, and the second date is October 8th, 2021. Now, if you notice this time period right here, it took 768 days for this conjunction to happen again. And if we look at our Sonata period calculator, that's less than the Sonata period that it calculated for us. Now, the reason that that happened is because the speed of the planets actually changes throughout the zodiac, and the reason for that is the orbits are not perfectly circular, keeping the speed of the planet the same. They're elliptical in nature. So when the planet is further from the sun, it actually moves more slowly than it moves when it's closer to the sun. So when the planets are moving faster, you're going to have a shorter Sonata cycle. And when the planets are moving more slowly, obviously you have a longer Sonata cycle. Now, if you calculate a bunch of, if you take 100 Sonata cycles and average out the length, you're going to come to this number here, like 779 for these two. But each individual cycle is going to vary. It can vary by like 20 plus days, actually. So that's the actual Sonata cycle of the Sun and Mars. Now, the cycle of return is how many of these Sonata cycles it takes for this conjunction to make its way around the zodiac and come all the way back to the original starting point. So that's the cycle of return. So what you're actually doing to get a Sonata cycle, you have to use two separate cycles. Input that, you get the Sonata cycle from those two cycles. And then the cycle of return is actually how long it takes for those conjunctions or oppositions or whatever you're using to come back to the same place in the zodiac. And then that's your cycle of return. Cycles of return vary obviously from different set of planets to different planets, and you're not going to have an exact precise return, which means when the conjunctions, for instance, for Mars and the Sun get back to the same spot in the zodiac, you might be off by a degree or two and not be in the exact same spot. Or the conjunction might happen, in the case of Mars and the Sun, the cycle of return is actually 79 years to within 5 days accuracy. So, for instance, if this is September 1st, 2019, and we take 2019, we add 79 years to that, we get 2098. Let's go, whoops, wow, that's interesting. Well, sorry about that, folks. But if we go to the year 2098 in this chart, we'll see, there we go, the cycle of return now. Let me move this. Come back. We see the conjunction happens on September 4th, which is 3 days later in the year than it happened here. So it's, in this particular instance, it's 79 days and 3 years. And here it happened at 159 degrees, and here it happens at 160, about 163 degrees. So it happened 4 degrees later in the zodiac. So you see that it's not exactly absolutely precise, but it's very, very close. So this 79-year cycle is another cycle that can be used to look at the stock market. Just as one example, just one blatantly obvious example, if we take the high of 1929, add 79 years to that, we get the year 2008, which is very close to the 2007 year high before we had the big crash down into early 2009. Now, I'm not saying that's how you should use the cycle. I'm saying that that's just an example of something that you could do, and you really need to, test it out, work with it, put some effort into it, and use this cycle any way that you can think of to see what kind of results you get with it. Another example of this cycle is the 60-year cycle. Now, the 60-year cycle, or it's actually approximately 60 years, is derived from the planets Jupiter and Saturn. Restrictions will turn off these guys and put Jupiter and Saturn on. And it's a result of 3 of their conjunctions. We'll just use one of these. So their next conjunction is going to be December of 2020. And then approximately 20 years after that, they get another conjunction. If we go back to our calculator here, it's 11.86 years that Jupiter takes to go around the sun. And Saturn is 29.46 years. You calculate it out, you get an average of 19.85 years. Now, just like the Earth and Saturn, or Sun and Saturn synodic cycle, it varies depending upon what part of the zodiac you start in. It can be a little bit less, it can be a little bit more. So if we follow this cycle around, the next is going to be in November of 2040, which is 20 years later. And we follow it around once again. And we get March, April of 2060. And then we follow it around one more time. And we get March of 2080, which is 60 years approximately after the first one. So if we use this one right here, let's do restrictions, restrict all, and Jupiter and Saturn. Move it all the way back to the first conjunction we looked at 2020 with these 2 planets. We can see, whoops, hold it for it. There we go. We can see that the conjunction moved in the zodiac. It's very close to where it was. Here's the original one from 2020. And it's right at about 300 degrees of the zodiac, or about 0 degrees Aquarius. And then this one is at 311 degrees, so it's about 11 degrees, yeah, about 11 degrees further along in the zodiac. But the cycle of return for this particular synodic cycle, the Jupiter and Saturn synodic cycle, is a very important one, and it is one that Gann actually used. So I recommend that you test this one out also. So anyway, by now I'm sure you get the idea of what the cycle of return is, and it can be used for any synodic cycle. So any two planets that have a synodic cycle, which any two planets do, you can pick any planet, find the synodic cycle, and then find the cycle of return for those two planets. And then there's another cycle for you to use and anticipate and try out forecasting in the market with. I recommend that you experiment with them and use various different methodologies, anything that you can think of, to see what may or may not be useful for you in your forecasting and or trading. So that'll be it for this video. I will probably there's probably 2 more videos worth of esoteric type cycles to look at. And then I'll be done with these. Now, I'm hoping I will get, let's see, I'm looking at the calendar here. I'm hoping that I'll be able to get done with those before Christmas, but I'm not promising that. So anyway, that'll be it for this video, and I will talk to you tomorrow.